So imagine an empire that is just, well, entirely built on this philosophy of ultimate peace, like total harmony.
Right. The classic utopian dream.
Exactly. Just an unbreakable commitment to this concept that they call the greater good. You picture this diplomatic juggernaut expanding across the galaxy, basically absorbing other cultures.
Yeah, and they do it with these promises of technological utopia and unified purpose.
Right. But here's the thing. Now imagine that to keep that pristine, perfectly diplomatic peace, this exact same empire actually relies on an elite vanguard of shock troops.
Oh, yeah. The dirty secret.
Literally, shock troops that are forged on a radioactive hellscape, guys armed with close quarters shotguns who are just, prone to blinding fits of aggression.
Quite the contrast.
It really is. And so today, for those of you joining us on this deep dive, we are tearing away that spotless bureaucratic mask of the Tau Empire. We're looking right past the watercast diplomats and all those shiny promises of enlightened unity.
Because you have to, right,
Yeah.
if you want to see how it actually works.
Exactly. We need to examine the brutal, beating heart of their military expansion. So today, we are diving deep into the Vior'la Sept.
I love this topic because
Ah.
it completely upends the conventional understanding of the Tao.
Oh, 100%.
Like, when you look at their grand, overarching aesthetic, what do you see? You see smooth lines, clean white and ochre armor,
Very sci-fi, very sleek.
very sleek. And there's this huge emphasis on patience and range superiority. You instantly think of their home system, the Tau Sept, which really prizes calculation, right? Measured responses, diplomatic assimilation above everything else.
Yeah, they want to talk you into joining them before they even think about shooting you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you have Vior'la, and Vior'la represents the absolute antithesis of that patient methodology.
Yeah, they are not patient at all.
Not even a little bit. To truly grasp how this galaxy-spanning empire actually functions, you really have to understand the violence it secretly requires to sustain itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the whole mission of this deep dive today is to figure out how a culture of hot-blooded, unhesitating shock troops operates inside a machine that just constantly preaches harmony.
Right. Where are the cracks in the facade?
Exactly. We want to find the friction points. And to do that, for you listening, we need to strip away the political abstraction of what a sept actually is.
Which is essentially a fully integrated planetary system, right?
Yeah.
And the distinct cultural grouping that evolves from that planet within the wider Tau Empire.
Right. So it's not just a military branch. It's an entire world and its people.
Yeah.
And we need to go straight to the terrifying geographic reality of the planet itself.
It's rough. It is a really rough place.
That's an understatement. So Vior'la is a world of the first sphere of expansion, which means it was one of the very first planets colonized when the Tau initially reached for the stars.
The early days.
Yeah. And the name Vior'la, it actually translates directly to hot-blooded.
Which sets the stage so perfectly, Because they didn't just name the planet that as some, poetic nod to their attitude.
No, it wasn't a PR move.
Not at all. The environment itself is staggeringly hostile. I mean, Vior'la orbits a binary star system.
I actually want to pause on that for a second, because saying it orbits a binary star system, it sounds like a neat piece of trivia. Like, oh, cool, Tatooine. 2 suns.
Right. Yeah, makes for a nice sunset.
Exactly. But until you actually think about the astrophysical mechanics of living under 2 suns, it's a nightmare. You have 2 massive gravitational bodies pulling at the planet, creating these erratic, extreme tidal forces.
The tectonic stress alone would be insane.
Insane. And then you have competing solar radiation just bombarding the atmosphere. Plus, the historical records detail a specific era on the planet known as the trial by fire.
Oh, yeah. The plasma storms.
Yes, where the surface of this world was just relentlessly scoured by plasma storms. And for you listening, we aren't talking about severe thunderstorms here.
No, you don't just grab an umbrella for this.
Right. A plasma storm is superheated, ionized gas tearing through the atmosphere. It literally incinerates everything it touches. So building a colony under those conditions, it's basically like trying to establish a functioning civilization inside the containment chamber of a malfunctioning fusion reactor.
That's actually a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because it forces a brutal, immediate adaptation.
It really does. You can't ignore it.
No, I mean, what's fascinating here is that you simply cannot build a society of passive patient philosophers
Hmm.
when the atmosphere itself randomly decides to boil the surface of your planet.
Right, you'd be dead in a week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This goes so far beyond just enduring bad weather.
Right.
The sheer extremity of a binary star system, combined with the lethal atmospheric anomalies of these plasma storms, it acts as an incredibly rigorous evolutionary and cultural filter.
A filter for survival.
Precisely. The early colonists of that first sphere, they had to either adapt their entire way of life, their architecture, their daily routines, their psychological baseline, or face immediate extinction.
But, I have to wonder about the chicken and egg scenario here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Like, did a hellish planet fundamentally rewire the Vior'lan people to make them aggressive? Or was it simply a meat grinder where only the most stubborn, unyielding, naturally aggressive individuals just happened to survive to pass on their genes?
Right. Nature versus nurture. It's almost certainly a compounding mixture of both, really. It creates this positive feedback loop of martial harshness.
Like an echo chamber of toughness.
Yeah. If you want to extrapolate this for the listener, just look at human history on Earth. Populations that survive in brutal, unforgiving landscapes, like deep deserts, the tundra, extreme altitudes. They so often develop cultures that prize toughness.
Right, quick, decisive action and just a really harsh resilience.
Exactly. Now, amplify that to a planetary scale under lethal plasma storms. Every single day during that first sphere era was a literal battle against the elements. You couldn't hesitate.
Because if a plasma storm breached your settlement's shielding?
You had seconds to react. Seconds. So resilience and a relentless, aggressive refusal to yield, they didn't just become admirable cultural traits, they became the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisites for basic survival.
So their hot-blooded temperament isn't just some quirky personality trait. It is a deeply inherited survival mechanism. They survived the trial by fire by essentially becoming a people of fire.
That's a great way to put it.
But the wild part is, this survivalist instinct didn't just vanish once they finally tamed the planet. Once they stabilized their cities.
No, they doubled down on it.
They really did. Instead of breathing a collective sigh of relief and enjoying a hard-won peace, they took that deeply ingrained, hot-blooded drive and they institutionalized it.
They wove it directly into the architecture of their society.
Right. Vior'la became the epicenter of the fire caste, which is the specialized, genetically distinct military arm of the Teo Empire.
They essentially turned survival into an art form. You have to realize, Vior'la isn't just another military garrison on the fringes of the empire.
It's way more than that.
It is the absolute pinnacle of martial excellence within the entire Tao Empire. It is home to these ancient, highly respected military academies, institutions with names like Vache, Foras, and Kovret.
And these aren't just your standard boot camps.
Oh, not at all. They don't just churn out standard infantry. These are hallowed proving grounds. They've been refining the art of war for centuries, applying that exact same brutal environmental pressure to their cadets to forge the perfect shock troops.
And when you create a pressure cooker like that, you inevitably produce absolute legends, or, absolute liabilities, depending on how you look at it.
Very true.
Because the one name that constantly appears in the historical records surrounding these academies is Commander Farsight.
Ah, Farsight, the legend himself.
He is, without a doubt, the most famous and infamous renegade in Tau history, a tactical genius who eventually fractured the empire. He broke away entirely from the control of the ethereals, the ruling caste.
Yeah, he just walked away and started his own enclave.
Exactly. And Farsight was born on Vior'la. His tactical brilliance and his aggressive, unyielding mindset were directly shaped by these very academies.
Which reveals such a brilliant contradiction at the heart of their culture. Think about it. The strict, highly regimented academies like Vache and Kovret, they are designed by the empire to produce the ultimate, fiercely loyal soldiers for the greater good.
Right, obedient super soldiers.
Yes. Yet the sheer intensity of the Vior'lan culture produces someone like Farsight, the ultimate separatist. It speaks volumes about the danger of their methodology.
It's like they made the sword too sharp.
Exactly. When you build an entire society around aggressive individualism, around the core concept of taking the fight directly to the enemy without a moment's hesitation, you are naturally going to birth commanders whose sheer force of will eventually leads them to challenge the system itself.
They don't know how to back down, even from their own bosses.
Right. You cannot forge a weapon that sharp, heated in that kind of fire, and expect it to never cut the hand that holds it.
That friction between Extreme military utility and extreme ideological risk is just fascinating. And you see that exact same aggressive individualism bleeding directly into how they present themselves on the battlefield.
Well, their aesthetic is incredible.
It really is. This brings us to the visual side of the Vior'la sept. Their traditional armor colors are stark. We're talking bright red, usually contrasted with bone white or greenish gray.
The red is definitely the main event.
Right, and the bright red is overtly meant to embody the fiery spirit of their homeworld. And for their absolute elite units, like the Honor Guard of the Ethereal on her, they actually invert the scheme.
Yeah, they wear primarily red armor with white markings to really loudly broadcast their elite status.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I have to challenge this from a purely tactical perspective.
Okay, let's hear it.
We're talking about a hyper-advanced military force, right? They utilize stealth fields, AI drones, extreme long-range weaponry. Why on earth would you equip your premier shock troops in glowing, bright red armor?
It seems like a terrible idea.
It seems entirely counterintuitive to the pragmatism of modern warfare. Isn't that essentially painting a massive target on your own chest?
Well, from a purely utilitarian standpoint of camouflage, yes. It seems completely illogical. I mean, if the goal is to blend in and avoid detection, bright red is a catastrophic failure.
Right, you'd want camo, or at least muted colors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we have to look past the physical utility of the armor here. We need to examine the psychology of the warriors wearing it.
Okay.
For the Vior'la sept, warfare is not just a kinetic exchange of firepower. It is deeply, deeply psychological. This is a culture that defines itself by the vanguard strike. So the bright red is not a failure of camouflage. It is a highly deliberate, calculated statement of presence.
It's weaponized intimidation.
Exactly,
It's a
Scott.
psychological declaration. Like, they aren't trying to hide. When a Viorlan strike force hits the battlefield, that flash of red tells the enemy exactly who has arrived.
There's no mistaking him for anyone else.
Right. It sends a message. We are the hot-blooded. We are the tip of the spear. And we absolutely do not need to hide in the shadows to destroy you.
It leverages their fearsome reputation to break the enemy's morale before the first shot is even fired.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It really is. And furthermore, consider the inverted colors of those elite units, like Anher's Honor Guard. Yes, it makes them hyper-visible to the enemy. But more importantly, it makes them hyper-visible to their own troops.
Oh, that makes sense. Like a banner in a medieval battle.
Yes. In the chaotic, high-speed, blindingly fast warfare that Vior'la favors, having your elite commanders instantly identifiable provides a critical, mobile rallying point.
Because everyone is moving so fast, you need an anchor.
Exactly. It projects an aura of fiery invincibility that anchors the advancing line. They wear the colors of the plasma storms that forge them to assert psychological dominance over the entire battlefield.
So it's not a uniform, it's a warning label.
I love that. A warning label.
But, you don't earn a galaxy-wide reputation as the Empire's premier shock troops just by wearing intimidating armor.
No, looking scary only gets you so far.
Right, you have to back it up, which means we need to break down the terrifying efficiency of their actual military doctrine, because Vior'la is synonymous with high-speed warfare and rapid deployment.
It's their bread and butter.
Their entire approach to combat is built around overwhelming firepower delivered at breakneck, almost reckless speeds.
They are the absolute masters of a deeply specialized military strategy known as the Montka.
The Montka, which translates to the killing blow.
Right, the killing blow.
Let's really analyze the Monta, because I think it is really easy to mistake it for a simple, mindless charge, like a Banzai charge.
Oh, but it isn't. Not at all.
It isn't. The strategy is designed to swiftly eliminate the enemy's key assets, so their command structure, their heavy armor, their supply lines, all in one overwhelming assault.
It's incredibly coordinated.
Yeah. The best way I can describe the Monka to you listening is to think of it like a shaped explosive charge on a heavy vault door.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You don't just pack explosives everywhere and hope the door breaks. You use pathfinders and sensors to identify the microscopic structural weak points, the hinges or the locking mechanism.
You find the one spot that matters.
Exactly. That's the precision aspect, the surgical scalpel. But once that target is identified, all the explosive kinetic energy of the entire strike force is funneled directly into that single point to violently blow the door off its hinges.
So it's surgical precision delivered with the blunt force trauma of a sledgehammer.
Yes, an avalanche of a sledgehammer.
That is an incredibly accurate mechanical breakdown of the doctrine. It requires flawless coordination and a complete, unwavering commitment to the strike. There is no half measure in a manca.
You can't change your mind halfway through.
No, once the blow is struck, it follows through completely. And what makes Vior'la so uniquely lethal is how this deeply ingrained aggression bleeds into and really mutates every other tactic they employ.
Like what?
Well, take the Kayon, for example,
Yeah.
which is the other primary tenet of Tau warfare.
Wait, okay. This contradicts everything we know about the Kayon strategy, because the Kayon translates to the patient hunter.
Exactly.
It is supposed to be the exact opposite of the manca. It's a passive trap where you hide your forces, you wait in perfect silence, and you allow the enemy to overextend into a kill zone. How on earth does a hot-blooded Vior'lan commander execute a passive trap?
Well, they don't.
They just don't do it.
They completely invert the execution of the Kayon to suit their temperament. When Vior'la employs the patient hunter, it completely ceases to be patient.
Okay, explain that.
Instead of hiding and waiting for the enemy to naturally wander into the trap, Vior'lan forces actively, aggressively bait the enemy.
Oh, they poke the bear.
They poke the bear relentlessly. They will launch these lightning-fast skirmishing attacks, hitting the enemy just hard enough and visibly enough to infuriate them and force a response.
So they're artificially triggering the ambush.
Yes. They actively escalate the conflict. They draw out reinforcements. They drag more and more of the enemy forces toward them. They essentially weaponize their own impatience.
That is wild.
They turn a passive ambush into a highly aggressive, escalating baiting maneuver before finally snapping the trap shut.
It's incredible. They literally do not know how to hit the brakes. Even when they're supposed to be standing still, they are moving forward.
Forward momentum at all times.
And this absolute refusal to slow down is actually codified directly into how their infantry and battlesuits operate. Like in both the tactical simulations and the historical lore, the defining characteristic of a Vior'la strike force is that their units can advance, meaning they are moving at absolute maximum sprinting speed and still accurately fire their weapons without any penalty.
It's a logistical nightmare for the enemy.
Let's just think about the mechanics of that for a second. You have a massive crisis battlesuit, right? This huge mechanized walker, heavily laden with armor and heavy weaponry.
Weighing multiple tons.
Right. And it's sprinting full tilt across a cratered battlefield. To maintain perfect lethal precision while doing that, it requires an unbelievable synergy of advanced gyroscopic stabilizers, neural-linked targeting arrays, and just the sheer physical endurance and spatial awareness of the pilot inside.
It creates a terrifying tactical reality for any defending force. You aren't fighting an army that pauses to aim, or one that digs into trenches to exchange volleys.
No, there's no breathing room.
None. You're facing a relentless forward-moving wall of overwhelming firepower that literally never stops closing the distance.
And the way they organize that firepower is uniquely specialized, too. The records detail two very specific formations that, I think, perfectly capture the duality of their mindset.
Oh, the Torocha and the Monad.
Yes.
Okay.
First, you have the Torocha. This is a team of crisis suits that are all identically equipped.
Which is very unusual for the Tau.
Extremely. Because standard tactical wisdom usually dictates that a squad should have mixed weaponry, right? To handle various threats, like someone brings anti-armor, someone brings anti-infantry.
The standard combined arms approach.
Right. But the Torocha throws that versatility entirely out the window. If they are assigned to crack a fortified bunker, every single battlesuit in the team equips heavy anti-bunker weaponry.
They don't care about the infantry. They just want the bunker gone.
Exactly. They lay down this hyper-focused, synchronized field of fire. It is pure, concentrated overkill designed to utterly vaporize one specific obstacle.
And acting as the inverse of that coordinated overkill, you have the concept of the Monad.
The lone wolf operative.
Precisely. The Monad is a single, extraordinarily elite warrior operating entirely independently.
Which is, again, so un-Tau-like. They're all about the greater good and working together.
Exactly. Their psychological profile is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because they're deployed specifically to sow chaos behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Or to execute these incredibly high-risk assassinations of key targets without any support whatsoever.
No backup.
None. The Monad is the ultimate expression of Vior'lan aggressive individualism. So you have the overwhelming singular sledgehammer of the Torocha operating right alongside the hyper-lethal independent scalpel of the Monad.
It's an incredible 1-2 punch, but, to execute these incredibly aggressive close-quarter strategies, to charge directly into the teeth of the enemy while sprinting, you need the right tools.
You need the right guns.
Yes. And this is where we find a massive friction point within the broader Tau Empire.
The technological divide.
Because standard Tau weaponry, like the iconic pulse rifle, is overwhelmingly focused on long-range engagements. The entire philosophy of the Empire's military is to kill the enemy from miles away before the enemy can even see them.
Why risk your own troops if you don't have to?
Exactly. But Vior'la's doctrine fundamentally demands that they close the distance. They want to look the enemy in the eye.
They want to feel the heat of the explosion.
Right. So how do you bridge the gap between an empire that wants to shoot from afar and a subculture that absolutely demands to fight up close?
Well, you force the Earthcast to completely rethink their engineering.
The Earthcast, they're the scientists and builders, right?
Exactly. They are the logistical backbone of the Empire. And the historical records show that they had to go back to the drawing board to specifically accommodate Vior'la's bloodlust.
Because they couldn't just tell them to stay back.
No, they tried. But they couldn't force the Vior'lan warriors to stay back and use long-range rifles. It simply wasn't in their nature. They were going to charge regardless. So the Earthcast developed bespoke, short-ranged, high-impact weaponry just for them, namely the pulse carbine and, more notably, the pulse blaster.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of the pulse blaster because it so perfectly illustrates this adaptation.
It's a fascinating piece of tech.
It is. So standard pulse weapons use induction fields to fire a tightly contained, stable bolt of plasma over a really long distance.
Right, like a sniper round.
Exactly. But to create the pulse blaster, the Earthcast had to essentially engineer a controlled failure.
A controlled failure. I love that.
That's what it is. They altered the magnetic containment coils so that the plasma bolt deliberately degrades the exact moment it leaves the barrel.
So it spreads out?
Yes, it spreads out into this devastating, localized cone of superheated energy. It basically acts like a plasma shotgun.
The stopping power is absolute, but the range is, well, virtually non-existent.
Right, you have to be right on top of the target, which completely eschews the standard Tau ethos of long-range superiority. To use a pulse blaster effectively, the Vior'lan warrior must put themselves in immediate, extreme physical danger.
Which, if we connect this to the bigger picture, reveals something incredibly profound about the political and ideological reality of the Tau Empire.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, we are often presented with this image of a rigidly top-down society, right?
Right.
Where the ruling ethereals dictate the doctrine and everyone else just blindly falls in line.
The propaganda version?
Exactly. But the invention of the pulse blaster shows an empire that is actually terrifyingly pragmatic. They are willing to completely compromise their core technological philosophy in order to cater to the deeply ingrained psychological extremes of a specific sub-faction.
They didn't try to restrain the Hound.
No. They recognized the Hound couldn't be tamed, so they simply engineered sharper teeth for it.
Oh, that is so grim. They weaponized the cultural defect. As long as the aggression expands the borders of the Empire, the ethereals will fund it, build weapons for it, and just unleash it.
Basically, yeah.
But as we know from examining literally any historical military, a doctrine can look absolutely flawless in a vacuum.
But on paper, it's perfect.
Right. The Mont Blanc and the Pulse Blasters, they look unbeatable when you are running perfectly controlled drills in the courtyards of the Forest Academy.
But the galaxy is not a courtyard.
No, it is not. The true test of a philosophy built entirely on hot-blooded aggression is what happens when it collides with the absolute worst, most chaotic horrors the universe has to offer.
And 40K has plenty of those.
It sure does, and the records detail two incredibly brutal case studies where Vior'la's aggression was put to the ultimate test. First, an invasion by the orcs, and second, an invasion by the forces of chaos.
The contrast in how Vior'la handled these two distinct threats is just staggering.
It is a total masterclass in the limits of psychological conditioning. So let's examine the orc conflict first, which took place in the year 600 of the 41st millennium.
M40, yeah.
Right. And this occurred during that trial by fire era we discussed earlier, meaning the planet's plasma storms were highly active.
The planet was basically a death trap.
A literal death trap. So a massive orc fleet invades the Vior'la Sept. Now, for the listener, orcs are not a conventional military.
No, they don't do tactics or supply lines.
Right. They're a biologically engineered fungal species that lives entirely for the joy of brutal, close quarters, unrelenting combat.
They are just a massive green tide of mindless brute force.
And in many ways, they act as this twisted, dark mirror to Vior'la's own desire to charge forward, right?
Absolutely. You have these two incredibly aggressive, momentum-based forces hurtling toward each other.
But the Vior'lan forces didn't just meet the orcs in a massive, mindless head-on collision in the middle of a field.
Because that's what the orcs wanted.
Exactly. And this is where the tactical brilliance of those academies really shines through. The Vior'la Pathfinders, these are their lightly armored forward scouts who excel at high-speed maneuvering. They realized they couldn't simply outmuscle a horde of millions of orcs in a brawl.
So what did they do?
They weaponized the planet itself.
Oh, it's so smart.
They took the very environment that forged their harsh culture and used it as an anvil. The Pathfinders utilized their mobility to constantly harass the orc vanguard. They stayed just out of reach and brilliantly baited the greenskins directly into the path of the planet's lethal plasma storms.
They dragged the invaders into an environmental meat grinder. It is a textbook, flawless execution of their philosophy.
It really is.
They used their defining traits, their speed, their aggressive baiting tactics, and their intimate, hard-won understanding of their own hostile environment to turn an overwhelming numerical disadvantage into a decisive victory.
Because the orcs had no idea how to survive those storms.
Exactly. The orcs lacked the environmental conditioning and the tactical discipline that the Vior'la Tau had honed over generations. The plasma storms just incinerated the orc hordes. It was a complete triumph of disciplined, calculating aggression over mindless, undisciplined rage.
It proved that the Vior'la way of war was perfect. They survived, they adapted, and they destroyed the invaders.
A huge success story for the academies.
But then we look at the second case study, the invasion of Vior'la by the World Eaters Chaos Space Marines.
Ah, this is where it all falls apart.
Yeah, this is where the narrative takes a deeply terrifying turn. It exposes this massive, fatal flaw hidden inside their greatest strength.
Because the Chaos invasion forces us to ask a really critical question about the structural integrity of the Vior'lan mind.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when the World Eaters invaded, they brought something the orcs didn't possess. The orcs brought physical violence. The World Eaters brought supernatural corruption.
The warp.
Yes. The World Eaters are dedicated to Khorne, who is the chaos god of blood, rage, and endless slaughter. Now, initially, the records indicate that the Tau's defensive strategy was working perfectly.
Like it did against the orcs.
Right. The Monka was effective. They were utilizing their high-speed mobility, they were laying down devastating fields of fire with those pulse blasters, and systematically dismantling the Chaos heavy infantry.
But here's the massive problem. You cannot shoot an emotion.
No.
You cannot put a pulse round through a supernatural aura of pure manifesting rage.
Exactly. This raises an important question about how the warp affects different races. The rage of Khorne isn't just a psychological buff for the Chaos Marines. It is a literal psychic contagion.
It's an infection.
It is a localized breach of reality that bleeds the raw essence of anger into the minds of anyone in proximity. Now, the Taus are generally known for having a very weak psychic presence.
Which normally insulates them from the corrupting influence of chaos, right? Like they don't usually get possessed.
Exactly. They're usually pretty immune to this stuff. But the Vior'lan culture is entirely constructed around a tightly coiled spring of marshaled pride, anger, and hot-blooded aggression.
They already run hot.
So when that perfectly conditioned, deeply ingrained aggression was exposed to the unfiltered, supernatural rage of a chaos god, the Vior'lan mental architecture simply overloaded.
It's short-circuited.
Their discipline snapped completely.
And the records describe this in horrifying detail. The psychic contagion of Khorne infected the hot-headed Tau ranks. Millions of highly trained, deeply disciplined shock troops completely abandoned their ranged tactics.
They just threw it all away?
They forgot the academies, they threw away the Monka, they literally dropped their pulse weapons, drew their ceremonial bonding knives, and charged into absolute suicidal melee combat against fully armored, genetically enhanced, chaos-infused space marines.
Which is madness.
It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Millions of their most elite warriors died, completely consumed by the very emotion that they believed they had mastered.
It is a profound and incredibly tragic lesson in the vulnerability of a singular extreme military doctrine. The Vior'la Sept is perfectly engineered to fight conventional kinetic wars against physical enemies, even brutal ones like the orcs.
But this was different.
But when faced with the pure supernatural fury of chaos, their greatest strength, their controlled aggression, was perfectly weaponized against them. Because their entire societal foundation is built on hot blood, they were uniquely catastrophically susceptible to an entity that embodies uncontrolled aggression.
Like adding gasoline to a fire.
Exactly. It proves that when your culture is essentially a controlled fire, it only takes a single spark of true supernatural chaos to boil that blood completely out of control.
It's just a chilling image. You have an entire planetary defense force losing its collective mind and willingly throwing itself into a meat grinder. And the most terrifying part of this whole incident is that the Vior'lan forces couldn't even save themselves.
They couldn't pull back.
No, they didn't suddenly snap out of it when they saw their comrades dying. They didn't call for a tactical retreat. They had to be rescued from their own minds.
By the ethereals.
Yes, a council of ethereals had to physically deploy to the battlefield. And for the uninitiated listening, the ethereals are the mysterious ruling caste of the Tau Empire. They exert this pacifying, almost hypnotic, pheromonal, and psychic control over all the other castes.
They're the ultimate mediators.
Right, and these ethereals had to arrive on the front lines and physically exert their overwhelming pacifying influence just to break Korn's grip on the fire caste's minds. That was the only thing that allowed the survivors to actually turn around and evacuate. Vior'la was entirely incapable of saving itself from its own rage.
Which perfectly underscores the incredibly delicate, highly dangerous tightrope that the Tau Empire is constantly walking.
So what does this all mean for the Empire?
It means they absolutely rely on the sheer, unhesitating violence of Vior'la to aggressively expand their borders and protect their systems. But they must constantly monitor them. They have to keep them on an incredibly short leash, knowing that this violence is a volatile fuel that can easily ignite the entire machine.
It could burn down the whole empire.
The ethereals had to intervene because Vior'la represents a fire that can never truly be trusted to burn only the enemy.
Wow. And I think this brings us to the philosophical core of what these historical records are actually demonstrating for us today. We are moving beyond the specific battles and the weapons tech to look at what this implies for the very concept of utopian empires.
The big picture.
The big picture. The
Wow.
ultimate horror of the Vior'la Sept is that it completely shatters the illusion we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive. The Tau Empire is absolutely not a monolithic, peaceful state that gently persuades the galaxy to join hands.
Not even close.
Vior'la is the undeniable, blood-soaked proof that beneath the surface of this utopian diplomatic machine lies an unleashed, unhesitating engine of pure aggression.
They serve as the dark, entirely necessary foil to the patient, calculated septs like the Tau homeworld. They represent the uncomfortable, unspoken truth of the greater good.
The truth they don't put on the brochures.
Exactly. You cannot build an expanding, galaxy-spanning empire purely on diplomacy, trade agreements, and patience. The universe is too hostile. At some point, diplomacy fails.
Right.
At some point, you need the sledgehammer. You need the shock troops who do not hesitate, who do not ask philosophical questions, who simply take the battle directly to the enemy and never relent until the target is destroyed. Vior'la is the physical embodiment of the sheer violence required to maintain a supposedly peaceful empire.
And for you listening, whether you are analyzing a massive fictional empire, a historical regime, or even a modern multinational organization, I want you to view this as a masterclass in looking beneath the surface.
Always look at the vanguard.
Always. What presents itself to the public as a unified front of measured pragmatism and peaceful intent almost always relies on deeply hidden, specialized, and often entirely contradictory extremes behind the scenes just to function. The Tau Empire preaches universal peace, but it relies on a society forged in lethal plasma storms, trained in ancient, grueling academies to execute lightning-fast, killing blows with short-range plasma shotguns. The greater good needs hot blood to survive.
It's a phenomenal contradiction. And it leaves us with an incredibly vital question regarding the nature of any system that relies on this kind of specialized extremity to survive.
Right, the long-term consequences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We see that the Tau Empire, in its relentless pursuit of a utopian greater good, has found it absolutely necessary to cultivate, protect, and technologically cater to a subculture of pure, unrelenting aggression. They need the fire caste of Vior'la. They need the Monka.
They can't survive without them.
But when an empire so deeply integrates an engine of pure, volatile violence into its core functioning, you have to wonder about the long-term ideological corrosion.
Yeah.
If your vanguard is forged in hot blood, if the tip of your spear is defined by a rage that requires constant physical supervision by the ruling class, just so it doesn't turn on itself, at what point does that weapon begin to fundamentally redefine the greater good entirely?
That is a terrifying thought.
If the very foundation of your expansion is built by those who only know the killing blow, Can the empire they are building ever truly know peace?